I never believed in the supernatural until that fateful night. It was just another boring evening, scrolling through my phone in bed, when I stumbled upon a forum thread titled "True Scary Stories to Help You to Sleep." I chuckled at the irony and clicked, figuring I'd read a few tales before drifting off. The first story seemed tame enough, a classic tale of mysterious footsteps in an empty house. But as I delved deeper into the thread, the stories grew increasingly disturbing. One user described waking up to find a stranger standing at the foot of their bed, vanishing when they blinked. Another recounted a terrifying experience with sleep paralysis, feeling an evil presence in the room. I told myself it was all fiction, just vivid imaginations at work. Still, I found myself pulling the covers tighter, my eyes darting to the shadowy corners of my bedroom. Just as I was about to put my phone down and try to sleep, I came across a post that made my blood run cold. "Whatever you do, don't read this story out loud," it began. Intrigued, I continued reading silently. The story described an ancient ritual to summon a malevolent entity known as the Night Whisperer. According to the legend, speaking its name aloud would invite it into our world. I scoffed, thinking it was just another creepypasta. But as I reached the end of the post, I found myself whispering the entity's name under my breath without thinking. Nocturne Susurrus. The moment the words left my lips, my bedside lamp flickered and went out. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It's just a coincidence, I told myself. Probably a power surge. But then I heard it, a faint whisper coming from the darkest corner of my room. "Who dares to speak my name?" I bolted upright, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. The screen remained black, no matter how many times I pressed the power button. The whisper came again, closer this time. "I've been waiting for someone to invite me in." "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. "This isn't funny." A low chuckle echoed through the room, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Oh, but it is funny. Humans never learn, do they? Always so curious, always pushing boundaries they don't understand." I scrambled out of bed, stumbling towards the door. My hand grasped the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. Locked. From the outside. "You can't leave now," the voice purred. "We've only just begun." I spun around, pressing my back against the door. In the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains, I could make out a dark shape forming in the center of the room. It was like a void, darker than the surrounding shadows, vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting and writhing. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. The shape moved closer, and I could feel an icy coldness radiating from it. "What do I want?" "I want what all forgotten gods want: to be remembered, to be feared, to feed on the delicious terror of mortals like yourself." I closed my eyes, praying this was all just a vivid nightmare. When I opened them again, the shape was inches from my face. I could see now that it wasn't just darkness, it was composed of thousands of crawling, squirming insects. "Your fear sustains me," it hissed. "But I need more. So much more." Suddenly, the insects dispersed, swarming around the room. I swatted at them frantically as they crawled over my skin, into my hair, trying to force their way into my mouth and nose. "Stop!" I screamed. "Please, make it stop." The insects retreated, reforming into the shadowy figure. "But we've only just started, my dear. The night is young, and there are so many delightful terrors to explore. As if on cue, the walls of my bedroom began to stretch and warp. The familiar posters and photos twisted into nightmarish scenes of grinning skulls, writhing tentacles, eyes that seemed to follow my every move. "What's happening?" I whispered, sinking to the floor. The entity's laughter filled the room. Reality is such a fragile thing, so easily manipulated. The floor beneath me turned to quicksand, and I felt myself sinking. I thrashed and struggled, but the more I fought, the faster I sank. Just as my head was about to go under, everything snapped back to normal. I found myself lying on the solid floor, gasping for breath. "Isn't this fun?" the entity crooned. "But let's take things up a notch, shall we?" The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath misting in the air. Frost crept across the windows, forming intricate, alien patterns. "Cold?" the entity asked mockingly. "Don't worry, I'll warm things up for you." The frost on the windows began to melt, the water running down in rivulets. But it wasn't water, it was blood. Thick, dark blood that pooled on the floor and began to rise. I scrambled onto my bed, watching in horror as the blood level rose higher and higher. "Why are you doing this?" I cried out. "Because I can," the entity replied simply. "Because you invited me. Because your fear is the sweetest nectar." The blood reached the edge of my bed, soaking into the sheets. I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to stay above the rising tide. "Please," I begged. "I'll do anything. Just make it stop." The entity materialized beside me on the bed, its form constantly shifting between various nightmarish shapes. "Anything?" "Oh, my dear, you shouldn't make promises you don't understand." The blood receded, leaving no trace behind. But the entity remained, its presence a cold weight beside me. "I could leave, you know," it said conversationally. "End this night of terror. But there's a price." I swallowed hard. "What price?" "Your soul?" "No, too cliché." "How about a story?" "Your story. Tell the world what happened here tonight. Spread the fear. Let others invite me in." I shook my head vehemently. "No, I can't do that. I won't subject anyone else to this horror." The entity sighed, a sound like rustling leaves. "Such nobility. But you misunderstand. You don't have a choice." Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to reach for my phone. To my surprise, it turned on easily. The forum thread was still open. "Right," the entity commanded. "Share your experience. Let others know the terror that awaits them." My fingers moved across the screen of their own accord, typing out the events of the night. I tried to resist, to warn potential readers, but the words that appeared were not my own. "That's it," the entity purred. "Draw them in. Make them curious. Make them want to speak my name." As I typed, I could feel the entity's power growing. The shadows in the room deepened, and I heard distant whispers, other voices, other victims. "You're not the first," the entity said, reading my thoughts. "And you certainly won't be the last. Each story, each terrified reader, brings me closer to this world. Soon, I won't need an invitation to cross over." I wanted to scream, to warn everyone who might read this. but the words that flowed from my fingers were enticing, mysterious, designed to pique curiosity rather than instill caution. As I neared the end of the post, the entity leaned in close, its breath like Arctic wind on my neck. Now for the finishing touch. The name. My name. The key that unlocks the door between worlds. I tried to resist, but my fingers typed out those two fatal words, Nocturne Susurrus. Perfect, the entity whispered. And now, we wait. For the next curious soul. For the next invitation. For the fear to spread, one reader at a time. The entity faded from view, but I could still feel its presence. In the shadows. In the whisper of the wind. In the beating of my own terrified heart. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. Minutes? Hours? The night seemed endless. But eventually, I saw the first notification. Someone had read my post. Someone had commented. Wow, creepy story. Is it okay if I share this? I wanted to scream, to beg them not to spread it further. But my fingers typed out a different response, of course. The more people who read it, the better. Another notification. Another reader. Another potential victim. As the sun began to rise, I felt the entity's presence recede. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Watching. Growing stronger with each new reader, each whispered name. And I was powerless to stop it. All I could do was watch as my story spread, knowing that with each share, each like, each curious reader, I was damning another soul to the same fate. So if you're reading this now, heed my warning. Don't speak the name. Don't invite it in. Because once you do, there's no escape. The night whisperer is always listening, always waiting for another victim to fall into its trap. I thought the nightmare would end with the rising sun, but I was terribly mistaken. As days passed, I found myself constantly checking the forum, watching in horror as my post gained traction. Each new comment, each share, felt like a dagger in my heart. I was responsible for spreading this curse, and the guilt was eating me alive. A week after that fateful night, I received a private message on the forum. I spoke the name, it read, "Please help me." My blood ran cold as I replied, asking for details. The response came quickly, describing a series of terrifying encounters eerily similar to my own. The night whisperer was expanding its reach, and I was powerless to stop it. More messages flooded in over the following days. Dozens, then hundreds of people, all claiming to have summoned the entity. Some described nightmarish visions, others spoke of physical manifestations, shadows that moved on their own, whispers in empty rooms, the feeling of icy fingers brushing against their skin in the dark. I tried to warn people, to delete my original post, but every attempt was thwarted. My account seemed to have a mind of its own, continuing to engage with readers and encourage them to share the story. I was a puppet, and the night whisperer was pulling the strings. As the entity's influence grew, I began to notice strange occurrences in my daily life. Shadows seemed to linger too long, even in bright sunlight. Reflections in mirrors and windows didn't always match reality, showing glimpses of a world twisted and wrong. And always, there was the faint whisper at the edge of my hearing, unintelligible but undeniably malevolent. One night, about a month after my first encounter, I woke to find my room filled with an eerie, pulsing light. Floating in the center was a shimmering portal, its edges writhing and undulating like living tendrils. Through it, I could see a landscape of nightmares, a world of perpetual twilight, where impossible geometries twisted in on themselves and creatures of shadow and flame roamed freely. The Night Whisperer's voice echoed through my mind. See what you've helped create? A bridge between worlds, built on the fear of those you've damned. Soon, the veil will tear completely, and my kind will walk your world freely. I watched in horror as a clawed hand reached through the portal, followed by another and another. The air filled with an otherworldly chittering as more creatures pressed against the thinning barrier between realities. No! I screamed, lunging forward to try and close the portal somehow. But as soon as I touched it, I felt myself being pulled through. I fought against the force, but it was like trying to swim against a riptide. In moments, I found myself on the other side, in that nightmare realm. The portal snapped shut behind me, leaving me trapped in a world of eternal twilight and terror. Creatures of shadow and flame circled me, their forms constantly shifting and changing. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that my mind struggled to comprehend them. Welcome home, the Night Whisperer's voice boomed from everywhere at once. You've served your purpose well. Now, you'll witness firsthand the fruit of your labors. Days passed, or maybe years. Time had no meaning in this place. I wandered through landscapes that defied logic, hunted by creatures born of humanity's deepest fears. I saw other humans too, lost souls who had also spoken the name, now trapped in this nightmare realm. But the worst part was watching what was happening back in our world. Somehow, I could see glimpses of Earth, like looking through windows scattered throughout this twisted landscape. I watched as the influence of the Night Whisperer and its kind grew stronger. More portals opened, allowing these eldritch horrors to slip into our reality. At first, it was subtle. An increase in nightmares and sleep paralysis across the globe. Then came the sightings, strange creatures glimpsed in the shadows, impossible things caught on security cameras. The world's governments tried to cover it up, but the truth couldn't be contained forever. I watched helplessly as panic spread, as the fabric of society began to unravel in the face of these otherworldly terrors. And all the while, the Night Whisperer's laughter echoed through both worlds. This is your legacy, it would remind me. Your curiosity, your willingness to tempt fate, has doomed your entire species. I tried to find a way back, to warn people, to somehow undo what I'd done. But every attempt was futile. I was trapped, forced to watch as my world descended into chaos and terror. But then, when all hope seemed lost, I met her. Another lost soul, wandering this nightmare realm. But unlike the others I'd encountered, broken and gibbering with madness, she seemed different. Determined. Her name was Lyra, and she claimed to know a way to stop the Night Whisperer. There's an ancient artifact, she told me, her eyes darting nervously as if afraid the very air might be listening. A relic from a time before these creatures, when the barriers between worlds were stronger. If we can find it, we might be able to seal the portals and banish these horrors back to their own realm. It seemed impossible, a fool's errand in this vast and twisted world. But what choice did we have? And so, we set out on a perilous journey through the nightmare landscape, dodging eldritch abominations and searching for any clue that might lead us to this artifact. We traversed forests where the trees whispered madness, crossed oceans of liquid shadow teeming with monstrosities, and scaled mountains that seemed to actively resist our progress. All the while, we gathered others to our cause, fellow humans trapped in this realm, clinging to the faint hope of redemption and a way home. As our group grew, so did the attacks against us. The Night Whisperer and its kind seemed to realize the threat we posed. We lost people along the way, torn apart by shadow beasts or driven to madness by the horrors we encountered. But still, we pressed on. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found it. In the heart of a citadel built from crystallized nightmares, we discovered the artifact, a sphere of swirling light, pulsing with an energy that felt ancient and pure. But the Night Whisperer was waiting for us. As we entered the chamber housing the artifact, the entity materialized in all its terrifying glory. No longer content with shadows and whispers, it showed its true form, a writhing mass of darkness, punctuated by countless eyes and mouths, each screaming in a different voice. "Did you really think you could undo what has been done?" it roared. "The barriers are broken. Our worlds are joined. There is no going back." What followed was a battle beyond description, a clash between human determination and eldritch horror. We fought with everything we had, using weapons forged from our own fears and fueled by our desperate hope. In the chaos of the fight, I managed to reach the artifact. The moment my hands touched its surface, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Memories flooded my mind, not just my own, but those of countless others who had fallen victim to the Night Whisperer's influence. I saw the true history of our worlds, how they had once been separated by strong barriers, and how those barriers had weakened over time. I understood the Night Whisperer's true nature, not a god, but a parasite, feeding on fear and chaos. With this knowledge came understanding, and with understanding came power. I raised the artifact high, its light growing brighter and brighter until it outshone the darkness of this twisted realm. "No," the Night Whisperer shrieked. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy everything." But I did know. And I wasn't destroying, I was restoring. The artifact's power surged through me, and I focused all my will on repairing the barriers between worlds, on banishing these horrors back to their own realm. The light expanded, engulfing everything. I heard the screams of eldritch creatures as they were forced back through closing portals. I felt the fabric of reality shifting, healing, sealing shut the wounds that had allowed this infection to spread. And then, suddenly, silence. I opened my eyes to find myself back in my bedroom, exactly where this nightmare had begun. The artifact was gone, its power expended in that final, world-altering burst. For a moment, I feared it had all been a dream. But then I noticed the changes. The shadows in my room were just shadows, no longer hiding unspeakable horrors. The whispers that had plagued me for so long were silent. And when I checked the forum where this had all started, I found that my original post, along with all traces of the Night Whisperer, had vanished. In the days that followed, I learned that the world had changed. The incursions of eldritch horrors were already fading from public memory, becoming nothing more than an odd shared delusion or mass hysteria event that psychologists would debate for years to come. But I remembered. And I knew there were others out there who remembered too. Lyra, my companions in that nightmare realm, had they made it back as well? Were they out there somewhere, carrying the memory of what we'd faced and overcome? I don't know if the barriers between worlds will hold forever. I don't know if the Night Whisperer and its kind are truly gone, or merely biding their time until they find another way to breach our reality. But I do know this: the power to shape our world, for good or ill, lies within each of us. Our beliefs, our fears, our hopes, these things have more power than we realize. So I leave you with this warning and this hope. Be careful what you invite into your life. what stories you choose to believe and spread. But also know that even in the darkest night, even when facing the most terrifying monsters imaginable, the human spirit has the power to overcome. As for me, I'll keep watching the shadows, listening for whispers in the night. And if the day comes when the barriers weaken again, when the night whisperer tries to reclaim our world, well, this time, we'll be ready,